ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ أرسلنا إليهم كذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميعا لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اس عالم غربت میں تمہیں جان دو کیسے، اس دشت مصیبت میں تمہیں جان دو کیسے، اس وقت قیامت میں تمہیں جان دو کیسے، اے لال جو تم زندگاں مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، کیا گزرگی اس باپ کے دل پر نہیں سوچا، تم نے یہ میری جان علی اکبر نہیں سوچا، مر جاؤں گا میں تجھ سے بچھڑ کر نہیں سوچا، تم مجھ سے ضعیفی کا عصا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، دل روتا ہے نظروں سے اگر دور ہو بیٹا، کس طرح جدائی تیری منظور ہو بیٹا، تم ہی میری آنکھیں ہو میرا نور ہو بیٹا، مجھ سے میری آنکھوں کے ضیاء مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، ایک روز تجھے آئے کا مانگا تھا پھوپھی نے، 18 برس نازوں سے پالا تھا پھوپھی نے، بیٹوں سے بھی زیادہ تمہیں چاہا تھا پھوپھی نے، احسان جو زینب نے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، رکھتے نہیں تم اس کی خبر اے میرے پیارے، کس درجہ محبت ہے تیری دل میں ہمارے، نانا کی میرے شکل ہے پیکر میں تمہارے، تم صورت محبوب خدا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو، اکبر تمہیں معلوم ہے کیا مانگ رہے ہو، تم باپ سے مرنے کی رضا مانگ رہے ہو۔ پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Respected scholar, my elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Marhamin al-Fatiha. Ayama Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا وطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We send and extend our condolences to Rasulullah, to Sayyida Fatima, to all the Ahlul Kisa, Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein and Imam Ali, to all the Ma'asumeen, and especially the Imam of the time, alayhimu salatu wassalam, on the anniversary of the martyrdom of our 9th holy beloved Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad At-Taqi alayhi salatu wassalam. It's very interesting, I think, that the date, the anniversary of his Shahada falls in, among these events that are going on right now, right? It's a very interesting time in the world, especially here in America. We know, of course, the racism that Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam dealt with. So many think that this is the topic that should be addressed, right? And still right now in America, this is still one of the main topics that people are discussing, debating, researching, setting up panels and arguing over points here and there. Whether it's the different types of racism, right? Institutional, unconscious, structural, etc. Or specifically about how things should be addressed and how we're supposed to move forward and address the problems that you and I might face in regards to us maybe being racist. So I think for most Muslims, meaning most Shias, whenever the wilada or the shahada of the Imam, of the ninth holy Imam comes up, I think especially tonight, most people are probably going to assume that we're going to address the topic of racism. Specifically, how the Imam faced racism and racists during his time. How did he deal with it? Excuse me. What lessons could we learn, and how do we adapt this in our community? So I'm not going to do that. I don't want to discuss the topic of racism, and I don't want to use this occasion of the Shahada of the ninth Imam to do that. Now, I know many of you might be saying, well, this needs to be discussed, though. This is the perfect night, right? Or in a sense, the perfect Imam to talk about it with. And there's a lot of reasons why I don't want to talk about it tonight. I won't give all the reasons, but I'll give a few so you can understand. Number one is that there's already plenty of discussions already done, right? In various communities. You can find YouTube now or Zoom or whatever full of these discussions about Islam and racism, or Islam and its anti-racist stance. How did Imam Hussein stand against racism? How did the Prophet deal with racists, etc.? These are all there and they've been done, right? Since the, unjust killing of George Floyd up until now, right? Almost every single weekend, there's multiple discussions about the topic. So really, do we need another one? I think that's a question we have to consider. Another point to consider, or another reason why I'd rather not discuss this topic on this night, is because, many people might say, Hasan, you have to address it because we have racists in the community still. People who haven't recognized that Islam is against racism. So you need to use this opportunity to address the problem, show them that Islam's against it so that they can stop being racist. Now, let me address the racists who are actually listening for a moment here, right? If you are a racist, right? If you're a racist individual, meaning if you believe that I am better than this person or that person or a group of people simply because of skin color or ethnic background or national background, whatever it is, you're using some crazy criteria to determine that you're better than other people. What is it that I could possibly say to you? What could I possibly tell you in 30 minutes that's going to get you to stop being racist? And the answer is nothing. I don't think there's anything I can say to you that'll make you stop this. I don't think there's anything I can say tonight that's going to make some people who believe, for example, that African Khojas are better than Pakistani Khojas or Indian Khojas. I don't think there's anything that I can say to you that'll make you stop believing in that. Or if there are some people who believe that, let's say, being an Arab Muslim is better than being, let's say, an Southeast Asian Muslim. Or being an Iranian Muslim or Iranian Shia is better than any other sort of Muslim. What am I supposed to say to people like that? Or, of course, the one that is most prominent right now, that Africans are somehow, or blacks are somehow lower than everybody else. What could I possibly do in 30 to 45 minutes to convince you to stop thinking that? I don't think it's possible. In fact, if you actually do believe that and you think that Islam allows it and it's fine the way you think and the way that you feel and the way that you act, well, I mean, that's between you and God on the day of judgment. All right, there's not really much I can do, through this kind of virtual call. It's not going to work. So for those who are kind of disappointed that I won't address that, look, people should recognize that Islam does not promote racism. It's a platitude. It's so obvious. I don't need to tell you that. I don't need to tell you about Bilal or the Africans that were there in Karbala or the oppression that the Imams went through. We don't need all these things to tell us that Islam is anti-racist. It's so obvious. So I don't want to waste time tonight talking about Islam is not racist and don't be racist anymore. I don't think there's any practical way for us to address the topic like this to get people to stop being racist. Now, there might be certain points about the discussion of racism within our communities that we have to address. I don't deny that, but that's going to require very real, in-depth, detailed discussions. And we're going to have to offer real solutions, and it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of opinions back and forth. It's going to be sensitive. There's going to be a lot of arguing, and that's not going to be done in one night. I don't think that even a panel discussion that happens over 3 hours can solve that issue. There's a root problem behind this issue of asabiya or racism or whatever word you want to call it. And we've already discussed the root cause of this. It's ignorance, it's jihala. That's the source of what, pretty much every issue, every problem that we're facing. I think it's maybe more important that we talk about that and address that issue. Because ignorance is something, as we've been mentioning before, which when a person is ignorant, when we have ignorance as a spiritual disease, it's going to end up manifesting in various different ways. Maybe it's going to end up that we're racist. Maybe it'll end up that we're arrogant. Maybe we'll show off. Maybe we'll be stingy. Whatever it is, ignorance is the root cause. And perhaps it's the case that racism or something else is just a symptom of that root disease. So, again, with all due respect to everybody who's listening or anybody who thinks we should do otherwise, I think we should go back to our original question. How do we combat ignorance in ourselves and in our community? So I want to take a look at the main fitna, the main issue, the fasad that took place during the time of our ninth Imam, alayhi salam, and see, after figuring out what was the main issue, the main problem, the main ignorant expression of ignorance that took place then, why did it take place? And what were some ways that the Imam or people themselves combated their issue of ignorance? So that's what I'd like to discuss tonight, inshallah. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So what was one of the main problems, issues, or fitnas during that time? So of course we could talk about the Abbasid issue, right? How Ma'mun treated the 8th Imam, how he treated subsequently the 9th Imam. That was one of the fitnas, definitely, right? A political one. I'd rather focus on the ignorance and the doubts and the problems within the Shia diaspora of that time, the Shia community themselves. The practicing Shias, the ones who seemed like they knew what was going on. You see, in the time of the 9th Imam, and many other Imams, but specifically in the 9th Imam, one of the major problems was that people were confused about who was the successor of the 8th Imam. They didn't know who was supposed to come, who was the Imam after Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salam. So they didn't know what to do. People would deny the 9th Imam. They refused to believe that he could be the successor to his father. Some even denied that he was actually a true descendant, offspring, and son of the 8th Imam. Right? And this is, again, what people try to focus on about the idea of racism. So we had a lot of issues going on, but this general ignorance about how wilaya was supposed to continue, that's what I want to focus on. So first is this. Why did people deny? Why did they refuse? Why wouldn't they accept Imam al-Jawad, Imam At-Taqi? Why wouldn't they accept him as the Imam? What were the issues? Though the historians say that there was two main problems, two main reasons that people at least expressed Now, we can say it was probably ignorance that was behind everything, but two main outward reasons that they gave. The first one was his age. They said, how in the world can a 6-year-old child become the Imam of the Ummah? It's not possible. How is that going to work? And the second reason they gave was, of course, the one that everybody focuses on, is, well, look at his race. Right? He was dark-skinned, right? Either very, very dark brown or black, right? Depending on the narrations you read. And they said, look, all the past Imams have all been a certain skin color. How in the world can this individual be descendant of Rasulullah? How can he be a descendant of Amir al-Mu'mineen? How can he be a descendant of Imam Ali and Imam Hussein, etc.? How can he? It doesn't make sense. So, age and race. These were the two reasons that outwardly people expressed to deny and refute and object to the succession of the 8th Imam's wilayah and imamah to the 9th Holy Imam. Now, I don't want to open up really what was going on behind their minds, because I think we can figure it out, and that's up for a bigger discussion. But just think about the reasons they were giving. When they see a 6-year-old child, now, again, they know that the Imams are able to, they are picked by Allah. They know that they are capable of mu'jizat and miracles, and they're capable of amazing things. They, of course, know that Nabi Isa alayhi salam was speaking in the cradle, right? Or speaking when he was a newborn. So they know all of these things, right? The Shias, the Muslims all know these things. Still, what's in their mind? That, hey, all of these other ma'asumeen, all of the other 8 Imams, they were all much older when they became the Imam. Isn't it strange now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, for this 6-year-old to become the Imam, right? And then the same thing for race. Well, the dark-skinned, black Imam. Well, everybody else before him, all his forefathers, were lighter-skinned. Isn't it weird for an Imam now to all of a sudden be darker? So it seems like what they were really referring to was what they considered tradition, orthodoxy, or the way things were. Well, that's how things have been before. Why would it change now? Why would we change things now? Now, I'll let the ones who are wise and intelligent, who think a little bit more, you can figure out what we're alluding to over here and the kind of contemporary modern problems that we see. When people say, well, we've done this way before, why are we going to change it now? So I'm not going to open that up. You're smarter than that. I think you can figure out where this is going. So we'll leave that discussion. So we know they were bringing up these issues. Now, how were they convinced? How were people convinced that, okay, just even though the Imam or this young boy is 6 years old, even though he's dark-skinned, we are convinced that he is the representative of Allah. He's the hujjah, the proof of God on earth right now, and he is the inheritor and successor of the 8th Imam and all the ma'asumeen alayhimus salatu wassalam. We're going to show tonight that there's 2 different approaches that were used. 2 different ways that were shown or people expressed, which we want to try to also implement in our lives right now when we get caught up in confusions and doubts and things that end up causing us to be ignorant with all the issues that we face right now. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So the first approach. Let's go to this delegation that shows up, right? So now, set your minds to what's going on. The 8th Imam now has been poisoned, and he's passed on, right? He's become Shaheed. Now they're trying to figure out who's the Imam. There's different things being said. One of the relatives of a member of the Hashemiyah, right? He claims to be the Imam of the time, right? He's an elder. So who is this person? His name is Abdullah ibn Musa al-Kadhim. Meaning what? He is the son of the 7th Imam, meaning the brother of the 8th Imam, and therefore the uncle of the 9th Imam, right? Abdullah, that was his name. Abdullah ibn Musa. So when all of the kind of head Shias, all of the knowledgeable ones, all the scholars, all the big shots, everybody's trying to figure out, like, okay, who's supposed to succeed now? Because, the ones who are in the presence of the 8th Imam, they knew, but not everybody was. So a lot of Shias were confused. So they are all invited to the house of this person, Abdullah. So they all gather at the house, and Abdullah makes the claim. He says, I'm the Imam. And I want you to understand, this is the son of the 7th Imam claiming that he's the Imam. The brother of the 8th Imam is telling everybody, all the Shias, that he's the rightful Imam. Right? A member of Ali Muhammad is claiming that he's the Imam. It wasn't just the Shias that were confused. Even the family members of the Ahlul Bayt, even they had huge problems. Even many of them were corrupt and had serious spiritual diseases. So be careful when you see this black turban, right? It doesn't always mean that a person's great. So, what the delegation now that's there, they're at Abdullah's house. So now they start questioning him. They say, okay, if you're the rightful Imam, can we ask you some questions? He says, yeah, of course. So they answer some, various issues, some fiqhi, legal issues. And he starts to give some strange responses, right? I don't want to go through the questions. Some of you have heard it before, and I'd rather not go through the details right now. But he gives some strange responses. So the Shias that are there are like, this is really weird. We've never heard these kind of answers before. Then, finally, in this gathering, the 9th Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad At-Taqi alayhi salatu wasalam shows up. So he comes with one of his caretakers, Wafat. So he comes in. So now again, it's this old basic servant, Wafat, coming in with the 6-year-old Imam, which everybody's just seeing like, this young boy. So he comes in, joins the gathering, and somebody else from the gathering who knew about Imam Jawad said, look, this is actually the Imam. This young boy, he's the real Imam. And now everybody's here, again, they're confused for 2 different reasons, right? One, because of the age, and one, because of race. So, one group says, fine, you know what? Let's ask him the questions and let's see what he says. So they ask him the exact same questions that they asked his uncle Abdullah. They ask him the questions, and of course, Imam al-Jawad, of course, he gives the right responses, right? And they say, this is the rightful Imam. And they say, your uncle was giving XYZ answer. And the Imam turns to him. Imam al-Jawad turns to him and is, ittaqullah. He's telling his uncle, have some taqwa, right? Have some dignity, have some honor. When you know that you are not the hujjah of Allah on earth, when you know that there's somebody more knowledgeable than you on the earth, keep your mouth shut. Don't give your own opinions and fatwas like this. This is inappropriate. Right? And this should be a lesson for us as well. When we're in gatherings where there are people who know how to give proper answers because they've studied, but you and I, because we feel like we have an opinion, we decide that we want to open our mouths and say whatever we want because, we want people to pay attention to us, right? It's an ego boost for us. So, what caused these elders here to figure out that Imam al-Jawad was the rightful Imam? So, the first thing is this. The first was that they knew the right questions to ask. They knew exactly what to ask Abdullah, and they asked the same questions to Imam al-Jawad. So, the first point that you and I should recognize is this, that education and learning is not just about, reading books. You have to be wise enough to know what questions to ask in order to learn. If you want to figure out who the rightful Imam is, as these elders wanted to, they needed to know what are the proper questions that we need to ask in order to ascertain whether this person is truly the Imam of the time or not. And they knew what they were doing, right? So that means they were intelligent, wise individuals. It wasn't some random people that were there asking these questions. It was intelligent Shias that were doing this. So let's look at one of the narrations attributed to Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam on this subject. He says, whoever acts without knowledge does more damage than he does good. Sometimes maybe the questions we ask aren't really useful questions. Sometimes the way that we research things aren't really beneficial. We have to be careful on, these actions that we do, the things that we do in the community, the things that we do with our family. If it's not based on information, based on knowledge, based on wisdom, then maybe we shouldn't do anything at all. Sometimes it's better to be silent. Sometimes it's not better. It's better to just keep our hands, can't keep our hands off. Think about all these contemporary issues that are going on right now, right? Racism, obviously, right? The thing that we didn't want to talk about. Every single community, in every single Shia community, in every single Muslim community, there is the exact same expectation. The management committee needs to make a response. The scholar needs to respond. We need to condemn. Anytime any event takes place, we have to condemn. We have to write a letter. We have to post on social media. We need to have a session. We have to have address it in the Jummah khutbah. We have to have a discussion panel and this session and that session. Everybody's just waiting for a reaction, right? We have become so reactionary. Instead of taking the lead on these issues and actually solving the problems, we just want to make ourselves feel better and just have a session so that everybody feels like, hey, we're against terrorism. We love everybody. We're so tolerant. We're so peaceful. We are anti-racist. Is that really the best use of our time? Is that really what we want to do? Look at another narration from the Imam. He says, don't rush into things before the appropriate time. Why? Because you might regret it. Look at a lot of these individuals who have gone out, held sessions about racism in Islam, and said things that they're now regretting because they spoke out of emotion. They spoke too soon. They said things which are not in line with Islamic thought, right? We have to be careful. Sometimes it's better that we wait and plan and plan and plan. And then when the time is right, after proper planning and thinking and considering, then we can go ahead and execute if need be. But we have to make sure that it's not reactionary, that it's based on knowledge, it's based on wisdom. And where do we get this? This becomes to our next point. Where do we get this information? Why were these individuals, why were these companions, these Shias, why were they able to ask the right questions? And why were their questions the right questions? It's because they knew that the source of truth was and is and will always be the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam, the Ahlul Bayt, and nobody else, only them. You see, they were educated in the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. They had ma'rifah, even in the small fiqhi issues, the small legal issues, like when they asked Abdullah and then the Imam about some small little issue about divorce. You see, when Abdullah, for example, first gives an answer to them, you know what they say? They said, look, your father didn't answer like this, your brother never answered like this, and your forefathers never answered like this. You see, these ashab, these companions, these Shias, they knew the wisdom of all the Ahlul Bayt and all of the Ma'sumin. They already knew what the answer should be. They were expecting a certain response to come from this person, Abdullah. That's how they were going to certify him. They had a connection to that silsila, to that chain of ma'rifah of the Ahlul Bayt. Nobody said in that gathering the answer that Abdullah gave or the answer that Imam al-Jawad gave. Nobody said, yeah, the answer makes sense to me. The answer is very rational. It's very logical. Oh, it's politically correct. Or it makes sense. It makes sense with the time and the place and the urf, etc., etc. They weren't looking for that. They knew those individuals, those companions, they were connected to the Ahlul Bayt. So they already expected a certain answer to come from Abdullah or from the rightful Imam, which they saw with Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam. And they didn't see this from Abdullah. So what does that mean for us? That means that we have to be careful. What is our barometer? What's our criteria and determining factor for what is right and wrong? Do we use other things like science or our own intellect or society or what's trending right now, or because a scholar or speaker is really, really good and they're a great orator, or because they seem like they're speaking common sense or logic? Is that what determines what's true and what's good and what's Islamic? Do we know that there's a trend of answers that have already been given by the Ahlul Bayt, that have been passed down from our ulama? Have we bothered to research any of these things? Or are we just picking up the answers from our back pockets? Who are you and I to come up with these ideas and make ourself, our own nafs, our own ego, the source of truth and falsehood? We have to be very, very, very careful about this, especially in these modern times, because a lot of speakers, unfortunately, are playing into this. They're playing into our ignorance that we don't and we can't distinguish between real knowledge and fake knowledge, real wisdom and fake wisdom. So let's make sure, as those companions did, let's make sure that the barometer for truth is always the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salatu wassalam. So what is the first approach that was taken? What is the first approach that people used to make sure that they were connected, that they could determine that this was really the Imam and the other person wasn't? It was the fact that they were really, really educated, that they had worked, they had struggled, and they had obtained what we call outer knowledge, acquired knowledge. And that's something that you and I also need to work on today. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, the first way that they were able to recognize that even though the Imam was 6 years old, or even though he was dark-skinned, how were they able to certify that he was really the Imam? It's because they were truly educated. Not just book educated, not just one or two articles educated. They were connected with the Ahlul Bayt. They had ma'rifah of all the Ahlul Bayt, not just one Imam. They didn't just make things up on their own, right? And they knew how to ask the right questions. Well, what's the other approach? What's the other way? Within that same gathering, now we go back to the issue of race here, right? Some say this was the same gathering. Some say that this was a separate gathering, regardless of the historical discussion. Some individuals said, look, this person, right, Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad, there's no way he can be a descendant of Rasulullah. Impossible. Why? Look at him. He's dark, and we know that all of his forefathers were lighter. Racially speaking, genetically speaking, it's impossible, right? They were trying to give a quote-unquote scientific, rational argument. Again, be careful of this stuff. So they said that, look, he has to come from, na'udhu billah, he comes from a different lineage. And, this is a huge, grave accusation against the 8th Imam and the mother of the 9th Imam. But let's not get into that point. So what did they do? The companions, the Shia, said, fine, let's call in the experts. Again, first thing is they were humble. They said, we're not the experts about genealogy. We're not able to determine things regarding facial features or skin color, whatever. Let's call in the experts. Who are the experts, or what knowledge did they have? The knowledge was known as ilmul firasa, or what we call physiognomy. Physiognomy was basically the science that, it's pretty much a pseudoscience now, or at least they call it a pseudoscience, but it's kind of the science of facial features. That individuals at that time, they could look at your facial features and they could tell, who here in this gathering is a relative, who's related to who were your ancestors, which family did you come from, right? There were experts in this. You had many people like that. So they called all of these experts, these ulama, of this facial recognition stuff, right? Think about them as kind of having the ability to do, they had like this kind of modern, we call it a facial recognition software, right? So all the algorithms were kind of built into them. So they come in the gathering, they're sitting there. And then they bring in it's the other way around, excuse me. So the Imam was already there, right? The 8th Imam, the 9th Imam was sitting in the gathering. These scholars, the experts in, facial features and genealogy and physiognomy, they would walk into the gathering. And when they immediately, when their eyes lock on to the 9th Imam, all of them fall down in sujood right away and say, who is this beautiful light? Who is this shining star which is illuminating this dark room? That's the first thing they say. You see, they didn't need any books. They didn't need, to ask questions. Because of the humility in their hearts, because of the purity of their soul, they were immediately able to recognize the Imam of their time through their hearts. So the first approach was what? It was outer or acquired knowledge. What's the second way, and possibly the more powerful way, the way that we should be striving for, is what we call inner knowledge. Knowledge by presence. Having that hudurul qalb, that presence of heart. We want our hearts to recognize the Imam. We don't want to have to go and question and read this and read that and put the Imam through some interrogation. We would love to be at a stage, just like these companions were, where the minute they see the individual, just seeing his light is enough for them to know that this is the Imam of my time, and they fall down in sujood. The same thing that you see with those sorcerers who fell down in sujood when they recognized the the true magic of the prophets, right? Of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. This is what we want to work to. Now look at the hadith about this point, again coming from Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad At-Taqi alayhi salatu wassalam. He says that in this narration, turning to Allah from the depths of our hearts, of your heart, is much better and much more powerful than tiring the body. Meaning what? It's much better that we purify ourselves to get real internal inner knowledge, true knowledge. This is better than tiring our body uselessly and just doing ibadat that has no meaning. Many of us, we spend so much time reading, doing all these extra a'mal, reciting all these Arabic things, reading Quran, but it doesn't change a thing in our heart and soul. What value does that really have? Now, I'm not saying abandon the Quran or abandon Salatul Layl or anything like that, but if we are not trying to spiritually purify ourselves, then we are leaving out the higher level of knowledge, that inner knowledge, that presential knowledge that really turns us towards God and towards His true representatives. Hopefully that's the knowledge that we can work towards so that we can recognize, inshallah, the Imam of our time. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajuhu sharif. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, in summation, the two different ways that these companions were able to recognize their Imam was one through acquired normal education, right? Acquired knowledge. It wasn't just simple book smarts though, right? They knew the right questions to ask because they were wise, and they had the ma'rifah and knowledge of all the Imams before them. So they knew what to say and knew how to recognize their Imam. They knew who was a fake. So we need to work on that ourselves, not just focus on one or two issues of one Imam, but recognize all of the wisdom of all of the previous ma'sumin, alayhimus salam. Then we said there's another way, a better way. That way is the way that these individuals fell down in sujood when they just saw the face of the Imam. That we purify our heart, so our heart, our soul recognizes truth. Our soul recognizes who is God's representative on the earth. So we have outer knowledge or acquired knowledge, and we have inner knowledge and knowledge by presence. So in conclusion, why do you and I face all of these confusions, disagreements, arguing? Why are things like racism still such an issue in our communities? Why are we still so ignorant? Why are our social media arguments still going on? Why are there still panel discussions about these simple topics? Instead of me telling you, I'll end with another beautiful narration attributed to our Imam. And he says this. He says, if the ignorant ones keep silent and they keep quiet, then people wouldn't have disagreed with each other. Think about that. If ignorant people were to keep quiet and keep silent, then people wouldn't have bothered to disagree. So next time you're in a chat group, next time you're on some thread on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, next time you see people in a baraza or a gathering arguing, and they're arguing nonsense, know that it's coming from a place of ignorance, and maybe it's better for you not to engage and be a part of that. If you really want to learn, attach yourself to people of knowledge, to people who can get you closer to Allah through the ma'rifah of the Ahlul Bayt. The way to ma'rifatullah is ma'rifatu Ahlul Bayt. Every single member, every single ma'asum, we have to collectively take that information, purify ourselves through this acquired knowledge and then through presential knowledge. So we pray that all of us can achieve that, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, of course, we know that although the Imams all have this effect on individuals where even when people would just, their eyes would lock with the Imam, they would light up the room, right? Those individuals would fall down in sujood. Even their enemies would say, who is this personality, right? But unfortunately, the Imams dealt with those who were jealous, those who were power hungry, especially the Abbasid, fake, unlawful, unjust, oppressive khulafa. Our beloved ninth Imam had to deal with, of course, losing his father at a young age. He had to deal with oppression coming from Ma'mun, who had oppressed his father, and now that same oppression continued onto him. Ma'mun then marries off his daughter to the ninth Imam, and then that oppression continues with the next Abbasid Khalifa, al-Mu'tasim. Al-Mu'tasim, according to the narrations, bribed the Imam's wife, right? They bribed the Imam's wife, who again was the daughter of Ma'mun. He gave her some money, Mu'tasim gave her some money and said, poison this person because he's ruining things for us. And they say in the narrations that this poison was so strong, the pain was so strong, and it coursed through the body of our beloved Imam, so much so that his body, once it was given to him and once he ingested it, they say that at once he started to convulse, he started to vomit out blood, right? And he felt the pain all throughout his body. And they say that this was very similar to the same pain, the same poison that was given to his grandfather, Imam Hasan. But mu'mineen, mu'minat, azadaran, I think that there is something even more tragic, even more of a bala that took place while the Imam was alive, more so than his poisoning and his assassination and shahada. There was something that was more painful than his death. And I think that this was a memory of the Imam from his childhood. And this memory, interestingly enough, also shows us the intelligence and the perceptiveness and wisdom of our beloved Imam al-Jawad when he was a young child, only a few years old, only 3 years old. And it also shows us the emotional struggles that he was going through. They say that the Imam, when he was young, about 2 or 3 years old, he had accompanied his father, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, towards Hajj. So they had gone towards to Hajj. So when they get there, when they're in Mecca, Imam Rida now is performing his Hajj rituals. He goes finally to Maqam Ibrahim. He performs his salah there, and he cries and he cries, and then he continues on with the rest of his Hajj. He moves on from there. Imam al-Jawad is watching this. Again, a young 2-3-year-old boy is watching his father. Their servant Muwaffaq takes Imam al-Jawad, he carries him. He does tawaf with this young boy, with this young child. He stops at Maqam Ibrahim and he sets down this young child. Now Imam al-Jawad is sitting there. This young 2-3-year-old boy, this young baby, is sitting now in Maqam Ibrahim, and he begins to sob, and begins crying. And Muwaffaq says, it's time to go now. Ya Ibn Rasulullah, it's time to go. Let's go. Your father's waiting for us. But Imam al-Jawad said, I refuse to leave. I'm not leaving yet. And when he couldn't take Imam al-Jawad, the slave ran to Imam Rida. He said, I cannot get your son out of Maqam Ibrahim. Can you come and help me? So they go together towards Maqam Ibrahim. Imam Rida asks his son, oh my son, how come you don't want to leave? Why are you sitting here? Why are you acting like this? What's happening to you? Imam al-Jawad says to his father, he says to him, he begins sighing and he begins crying even more. He says, Abata, Baba, how can I get up from here? When I saw you, I saw the way that you were saying salam to the Kaaba. I know that this was your akhir salam. I know this was your final salam, and you were doing al-wida. And I know that you'll never come back to this place, which means that you'll never come back to me. So how can I leave this place now knowing that I'll never see you again? Because they say that this was the moment that Imam was getting ready to be taken towards Khurasan. How can a son see his father leaving him from the last time? And when we hear this, of course, our hearts jump back to Karbala and the heartbreaking incident when we see another young child seeing her father run away from her. When we see Sakina giving her final salams to her father, and she says, Baba, is this our final salams? Is this the last time I'll see you? He says, yes, I have to leave. She says to him, are you leaving for the sake of Islam? She said, yes. He said, I'm leaving for the sake of Islam. He says, Baba, then can you do me one last favor? Of course, anything you want, Sakina. What do you want from me? He says, can you please send me back to Medina, send me back to my grandfather, send me back to Rasulullah, because I don't want to be here in Karbala anymore. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
یا حسین یا حسین کہتے تھے رو رو نہ کی بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو رو نہ کی بابا محمد تقی کیا غضب ہو گیا بابا محمد تقی کیسا سفر یہ ہوا جس سے جدائی ہوئی کیسا سفر یہ ہوا جس سے جدائی ہوئی راہی جنت ہوئی بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو رو نہ بابا محمد تقی کیا غضب ہو گیا بابا محمد تقی رون کیوں کربلا تم سے جدائی ہوئی رون کیوں کربلا تم سے جدائی ہوئی میں آج لٹ گیا بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو رو نکی بابا محمد تقی کیا غضب ہو گیا بابا محمد تقی زہر سے مارا تمہیں فاطمہ بے چین ہوئی سوئے جینا چل بسے بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو نکی بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو نکی بابا محمد تقی آج غضب ہو گیا بابا محمد قربان حسینہ واویلا سب خیش و برادر رن میں ہوئے قربان حسینہ واویلا پانی نہ پلایا اکبر کو اور تیر سے مارا اصغر کو کیا پانی سے تر سے ساگر کو طفلان حسینہ واویلا سب خیش و برادر رن میں ہوئے قربان حسینہ واویلا حسین شہید کربلا واویلا حسین شہید کربلا واویلا حسین امام مظلوم واویلا حسین شہید کربلا واویلا حسین شہید کربلا واویلا حسین شہید کربلا واویلا یا ازلم الدنیا الحسین مولانا یا ازلم الدنیا الحسین مولانا بادشاہ جن و بشر یا علی نادے علی 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 نادے علی علی یا علی نادے علی علی یا علی صاحب شمشیر دوسر یا علی نادے علی یا علی نادے علی علی یا علی یا وار محبوب خدا یا علی نادے علی 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 دافع ہر رنج و بلا یا علی نادے علی علی یا علی نادے علی علی یا چلیے مدینہ یا حسین لیے مدینہ یا حسین چلیے مدینہ یا حسین سغرا بلاتی یا حسین بابا کہاں ہو یا حسین چلیے مدینہ یا حسین چلیے مدینہ یا حسین اے پھوپھی اماں یا حسین اکبر کو لاؤ یا حسین اصغر کو لاؤ یا حسین چلیے مدینہ یا حسین چلیے مدینہ یا حسین چلیے Dina ya Hussein azwar ko lao ya Hussein दूध पिलाओ या हुसैन झूला झूलाओ या हुसैन चलिए मदीना या हुसैन चलिए मदीना या हुसैन
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد إلهي أذن البلاء وبرئ الخفاء وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وضاقت العرض ومنيت السماء وأنت المستعان وعليك المشتقى وعليك المعول في شدة والرخاء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أولي الأمر الذين فرزت علينا تعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب يا محمد يا علي يا محمد اكفياني فإنكما كافيان وانصراني فإنكما ناصران يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان الغوث 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 أدركني 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 الساعة 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 العجل 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 يا أرحم الراحمين بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعل الله الآخر الأحد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.